Yeah, afternoon, guys. It's pretty refreshing in 2023 to scroll through the internet and see that most of the 9/11 conspiracy theories that used to dominate online forums have now pretty much disappeared. A lot of the 9/11 conspiracy theorists have even shied away from claims that no airliner hit the Pentagon that day, which is nice to see, but there's still a few of the more popular theories that remain in circulation. The expected one, like the Twin Towers, were a controlled demolition, though they've gone away from trying to claim specifics of how it was anymore. Building 7, and then, of course, the $2.3 trillion Donald Rumsfeld announced missing from the Pentagon on September 10th. Now, 12 years ago, I uploaded a video debunking this claim. However, it hasn't aged very well because it's basically just white text on a black background that goes on for 5 minutes. It's pretty boring, it's uninteresting, it's not really appealing to watch at all. So I figured it's time for an update. So this video is going to split into 3 different parts. We're going to look at the claims, we're going to look at the evidence, and then we're going to look at the debunking. Firstly, the claims. So the claims are that on September 10th, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld admits or announces that the Department of Defense is missing $2.3 trillion. This, it seems, is awfully convenient to announce this because the very next day 9/11 happens and supposedly everyone then forgets about it.
The day before 9/11, the day before the attacks, Rumsfeld gave a press conference where he talked about trillions of dollars missing.
The claims continue that the $2.3 trillion must have therefore either been stolen by those who conspired to attack the US that morning and or were used to fund the attack, and that Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, etc. deliberately had the Pentagon targeted to divert eyes away from the theft and or spending of this $2.3 trillion. And finally, that the area of the Pentagon was specifically selected and hit because it housed the accountants, bookkeepers, the physical records of this missing money, suggesting a motive not only to distract the public from the announcement, but also to destroy all evidence of it.
Hitting the Pentagon in the Budget Analyst Office, where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001.
The evidence. Well, yes, Donald Rumsfeld did have a speech in the Pentagon on September 10th where he mentioned this $2.3 trillion.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
This press conference was broadcast live on C-SPAN and also reported in multiple news outlets, which is a rather curious strategy for a man who was literally hours away from destroying all traces of his existence, but I digress. The fact he announced this is no lie. There is also evidence that financial records, accountants, bookkeepers, budget analysts were killed in the attack. Quote, one Army office in the Pentagon lost 34 of its 65 employees in the attack. Most of those killed in the office, called the Resource Services Washington, were civilian accountants, bookkeepers, and budget analysts. The debunking. So, firstly, it's worth noting the wording or language that often gets used with this conspiracy theory, that Rumsfeld admits or announces, discloses, as if the sole purpose of this press conference was only to announce that they were missing money. Spoiler, it wasn't. That this is the first time and only time that this 2.3 trillion has ever been mentioned. Spoiler, it's not. And that he's admitting some sort of guilt or responsibility for this missing money. A lot of money to be taken responsibility for, despite the fact that Rumsfeld has only been in that job for 9 months. Even saying, or worse, using quotation marks around the word missing, implies that the money just suddenly disappeared from the Department of Defense's wallet, and that it's gone and never found. Suffice to say, the wording or language used paints a deliberately misleading picture of what has actually occurred here. And let's have a look why. It's important to listen to Rumsfeld press conference in its context. For the sake of time, I've cut it down to the applicable parts, but I'll have the full unedited video uploaded on my channel and linked in the description.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy. Not the people, but the processes. Not the civilians, but the systems. Not the men and women in uniform, but the uniformity of thought and action that we too often impose on them. In this building, money disappears into duplicative duties, bloated bureaucracy, not because of greed, but gridlock. Just as we must transform America's military capability to meet changing threats, we must transform the way the department works We must recognize another transformation, the revolution in management, technology, and business practices. Successful modern businesses are leaner and less hierarchical than ever before. They reward innovation and they share information. They have to be nimble in the face of rapid change or they die. Business enterprises die if they fail to adapt. And the fact that they can fail and die is what provides the incentive to survive. But governments can't die. So we need to find other incentives for bureaucracy to adapt and improve. The technology revolution has transformed organizations across the private sector, but not ours, not fully, not yet. We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions. We cannot share information from floor to floor in this building because it's stored on dozens of different technological systems that are inaccessible or incompatible.
So what is Rumsfeld actually talking about here? Well, he's saying that because of the outdated, incompatible, and inaccessible IT systems inside the Pentagon, they cannot track up to an estimated $2.3 trillion in transactions. That's it. It's not missing, not stolen, not lost. Other reports make this even clearer. Quote, "For years, the DoD and congressional officials have sought to reconcile defense financial documents to determine where billions of expenditure have gone. That money didn't fall down a hole, it's simply waiting to be accounted for. Complicating matters is that the DoD has 674 different computerized accounting, logistics, and personnel systems. Most of those 674 systems don't talk to one another unless somebody translates. This situation makes it hard to reconcile financial data. Billions of dollars in DoD taxpayer-provided money haven't disappeared. Missing expenditure is often reconciled a bit later in the same way that people would balance their checkbooks at the end of every month." So his press conference is aimed at fixing an evidently long-standing issue inside the Department of Defense's accounting and financial infrastructure. So how long had this been going on? Well, I mean, if you look at the physical amount of money, it should give you some sort of idea. We're talking about $2.3 trillion. Trillion, with a T. In 2001, the US national debt was only $3 trillion. The entire GDP of China didn't pass $2.3 trillion until 2005. $1 trillion is a shit ton of money, especially in 2001. It's not the sort of money that any government department is just going to have sitting around in a bank account ready to spend or be stolen. And as it turns out, this isn't the first time this $2.3 trillion figure has been reported. 9/11 Myths links almost a dozen other occasions, pre-9/11 and some as early as 1999, where this $2.3 trillion has been either mentioned directly or estimates thereabouts when reporting on the shambolic accounting history from the Defense Department. Linked in the description below, but I quote, "In fiscal 1999, a defense audit found that $2.3 trillion of balances, transactions, and adjustments were inadequately documented. These unsupported transactions do not mean the department ultimately cannot account for them," she advised, "but that tracking down the needed documents would take a long time. Auditors," she said, "might have to go to different computer systems, to different locations, or access different databases to get that information." And from the Associated Press in March 2000, quote, "The military's money managers last year made almost $7 trillion in adjustments to their financial ledgers in an attempt to make them add up," the Pentagon's Inspector General said in a report released Friday. The Pentagon could not show receipts for $2.3 trillion of these changes, and $500 billion of it was corrections of mistakes made in earlier adjustments. The big question is, based on how much money the US Defense Department gets every year, how long would it actually take to accumulate $2.3 trillion in transactions? While the record of US defense spending is available online, in 1980 it was $140 billion a year. In 1990, it was $325 billion a year. In 2001, it was $330 billion a year. So let's be generous and make the maths easy. We'll say the average yearly defense budget was $300 billion. You see where I'm going here. With the rate of spending, it's going to take a long, long time to accumulate $2.3 trillion of lost spending. Even if, let's say, 100% every dollar of all defense budget spending ends up being unaccounted for, it would take almost 8 years of defense spending to accumulate $2.3 trillion. That's a full 2 terms of Bill Clinton worth of defense spending. And that's if none of it was reconciled correctly. Even if 25% wasn't accounted correctly, that's 30 years or 3 decades of defense spending required to amount to $2.3 trillion. Clearly, this wasn't a Donald Rumsfeld problem, nor does it seem remotely realistically possible that this $2.3 trillion of defense money just suddenly got lost from the Pentagon's wallet overnight. So now that we've established what this $2.3 trillion actually is, how about the claim that the office investigating it was hit the next day on September 11? Well, to take a bit of a common sense sidestep here, I'll use a similar argument that I use when some talk about the motives that are given by conspiracy theorists as to why the Twin Towers or Building 7 was a controlled demolition, and that is the destruction of evidence and the assassination of witnesses. If this was a motive at the Pentagon, then it makes about as much sense, by which I mean it makes zero sense at all. As a method of assassinating witnesses or destroying evidence, it is woefully controlled, by which I mean crashing an airliner into a section of building has zero guarantee that the information you seek to destroy or the people you wish to harm would actually succeed. Paper can survive explosions. Hard drive platters can survive fires. People can and did survive the impact zones. People can be momentarily absent from the impact zone, like out for a smoke, or gone to the bathroom, or sick for the day. Records, especially large financial records, can be kept on multiple systems in multiple locations. If the motive for crashing an airliner is to kill key people or destroy evidence, it is incredibly sloppy, potentially ineffective, and to be fair, utterly insane when, for example, you could far easier just take a team of 6 people in with a paper shredder and some poison pills to quietly sort the problem out. And the results speak for themselves. I quoted an article earlier that said of the 65 people working in the budget analyst's office inside the Pentagon, half of them survived. So, what were the accounting and bookkeeping repercussions of the attack? Well, according to multiple reports, the only office that was affected was the Department of the Army. Because of the attack, they were unable to provide a standalone financial statement for 2001. However, their spending was accounted for anyway by a DoD-wide financial report. To quote, "The Department of the Army will state it won't publish a standalone financial statement for 2001 because the loss of financial management personnel sustained during the September 11 attack. Army financial statement information was included in the DoD fiscal year 2001 agency-wide financial statements." So the only bookkeeping repercussions of the attack was that the Army wasn't able to produce a standalone financial report, which was accounted for by the agency-wide financial report anyway. So whatever happened to this unaccounted for $2.3 trillion? Well, following 2001, it did in fact get reported on and followed up, despite what conspiracy theorists often claim. In 2002, $1.6 trillion had already been accounted for. To quote, "DoD financial experts are making good progress in reconciling the department's lost expenditures, trimming them from a prior estimated $2.3 trillion down to $700 billion. And he added, that amount continues to drop. We're getting it down and we are redesigning our systems so we'll go down from 600 odd systems to maybe 50, he explained. And so that's it. The $2.3 trillion was never missing. It wasn't conveniently announced on only the day prior to a major event. It wasn't forgotten about. And it wasn't any sort of motive for Bush to attack his own defense headquarters, because it wasn't a problem caused by the Bush administration, who had only just 9 months prior been sworn in. So I hope you all enjoyed this updated debunking. Make sure you post a link to this to anyone on Twitter or Reddit or Facebook or wherever, whenever anyone tries to claim that the Pentagon announced that it was missing $2.3 trillion the day before 9/11. It's as debunked today as it was 2 decades ago. Thanks for watching, guys.